So there we go. Is it
Sure do.
recording now? Yep.
I have a
Button's
little
on.
notification in the top left-hand corner telling me that we are being recorded.
Yep. Good morning, good evening.
Yeah. My greeting to you is good morning, and your greeting to me is good evening.
Good evening. Right. It's well, how long is it till the summertime gets switched on? Is it when do you guys
it can't
change?
be far away. It can't be far away because it's very dark in the mornings now. The days are getting much shorter.
Yeah, well, we're seeing the opposite. Obviously, it's getting light early in the morning, and well, it's how long to go till equal day and equal night? And it's only, what is it today? The 15th. Yeah, so it's only a week away, right?
Oh, June. Yeah, June. No.
The spring equinox. I mean, or for you, the autumn equinox. Yeah.
March 22nd, is it? March.
Yep. Yeah, a week from today, then. I thought it was the 21st, but it's it's.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think you're right. I think it is 21st.
Yeah. Maybe the winds will change there, and the coronavirus will dissipate.
Oh.
I take it that's been the topic of much of discussion, yeah, even down under.
Oh, definitely. Sitting in the bar after work today, they'd left I don't know what channel it was on the television, the big television screen in the bar, and it was just a constant barrage of coronavirus information, and no groups larger than 500 people allowed to be gathered.
Yeah.
The Australian Grand Prix cancelled. They're still playing cricket, but with no crowds, no spectators.
Yahoo! Okay, all just for the TV cameras.
Oh, if anybody returning to Australia at the moment has to go into 14 days of self-imposed isolation.
Are there any penalties if you don't? Because they've been talking about that worldwide, I think.
They claim there are, but I was harvesting the ire of all the other patrons of the bar, of course, when I'm saying, I look up and I said, they're saying now that it's become a directive, and because they had it going across the bottom of the screen, it said that this imposition of the 14-day thing is now a directive. I said, okay, so it's a directive. It's not a fucking law, so you don't have to listen to it. Tell them to get fucked. Everybody in the bars, hey.
That's you being, absolutely, how should I say, nearly irresponsible, Glenn, for even stating such a horrible thought.
Yeah. The general consensus.
How can you do that you're endangering the herd?
Oh, yeah. I'm an idiot too. I mean, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd say my feeling is that come Monday morning, when the people do actually recognise that they don't have any toilet paper more, I would assume even those that are in self-quarantine will probably nip into the companies they work at and steal them out of the toilets there. I'm expecting a barrage. I'm expecting a barrage of people to be going back to the company, and the toilets within company premises to be all these hygiene bottles. I bet you when I go in there on Monday morning, it'll be empty already. There'll be people sneaking in there at 5 in the morning to take their old toilet paper.
Well, the publican actually surprised me by saying, I'm going to have to keep an eye on my toilet rolls, on my toilets at the moment, because the toilet rolls will be walking shortly.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that, but yeah, that will probably start.
One good joke I heard was, one good joke my wee brother told me was, what the hell are UPS and Hermes going to do now? Because, if it's absolutely provable that the people are at home when they want to deliver.
Yes.
I mean, the question I ask myself regarding the toilet paper is: are people actually shitting more, or I mean, are they really going to be using that to clear the mucus from their pores or
that's
whatever?
exactly what I was about to say. What I was just about to say then was the same thing. I was actually asking these people in the bar. I said, "Why toilet paper? What can you explain to me why we have this issue now with we have panic buying they're calling it, of toilet paper? What for? Are one of the symptoms of coronavirus serious diarrhea? I haven't heard that mentioned." And
I think it's to
going,
clean up. I think it's just to clean up all the shite that's been talked about it.
I'd say so. I tried to explain to them that I believe that it's a meme. I believe that the powers that be, the guys that started this whole thing, sitting back smoking their cigars, laughing their heads off at how stupid the human race is, has created this meme to put out there to see what would happen. They know that they have control of the media. They know that they can create this meme, get it continuously read by newsreaders around the world, being plastered everywhere, so that they've actually created this situation of panic buying, and they're laughing about it. They must be laughing about it, because seriously, if I didn't think it was so serious, I'd be laughing.
Well, I'm going to make a prediction here that it'll all be over and forgotten in 6 to 8 weeks, because I don't think they can continue. I mean, it's great to scare the population to further various agendas, right? But they can't do it for too long, otherwise there'll be a pushback. So they're going to draw back with all the media propaganda. They'll say, "Wonderful, look, all our measures worked." Right, so all the things that we did, whatever, reducing the amount of cash because cash infects people, containing people in their movement and their travel, restricting them, introducing whatever these mandatory testings or mandatory whatevers, so they'll and the people will then say, "Oh yeah, it works, wonderful, yeah, we want all these things now." And then you're back to the Hegelian principle of having the people scream for the solution that you want to impose on them.
Yeah, problem, reaction, solution.
Exactly. So that's my prediction, that it's a kind of, they'll take it so far and pull back on it, and then rest on their laurels, how clever they were.
Yeah. Well, on that TV stream,
they'll have shaped the supply chain as well. They'll reshape the supply chain for their own benefit as well. In the meantime.
Well, in a way, I was even looking at it in a similar context to how they create wars to do similar things. It's just another way of doing that same thing. Making changes to all sorts of systems, getting stuck into the economic system, doing whatever they like under the guise of, beneficial.
This is the vessel for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. They'll deconstruct and then they'll construct and shape as to their needs, and you can see it in so many aspects of what they've done now in the last 6 weeks.
On that stream today, I saw the beginnings of what I believe, like you're saying, the beginnings of their ending of the pandemic. They're already creating graphs that are showing a peak and then a fall. I actually saw it several times. They brought up this. They had the Australian Prime Minister describing it, and he's describing how we're going through this stage at the moment in a rise, and they show the graph on the screen, and it sort of goes up a sort of a bell curve, but just a high peak, and then all of a sudden it's falling away back down to normal. So you can see they're already preparing the way.
Yep, they'll be clapping each other on the back pretty soon. People will go back to normal, but they'll be remembering that, if it should ever come again, then we know we can trigger the people, the way we want to trigger them. So.
Oh yeah. Well, the funny thing is, it's been going on for a damn long time. It's been going on for, I don't know, you probably haven't had a chance to have a look at that video I posted.
Yeah, no, I haven't, no.
Yeah. It's actually, he goes into how these sort of systems how this sort of thing was created. This whole use of pandemics has been used by powers that be for centuries at least.
Mm.
Whenever they were falling into situations of starvation, they'd create a pandemic. He goes into some pretty good discussions about how most of this stuff started with Robert Koch, and then went on to Pasteur. I actually remember we were talking about Pasteur recently, and there was a mention of a guy, Bernard.
We did it last week. We just never uploaded the video. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. The Bernard. There was another guy I mentioned called Bernard, and I thought he was the guy who had an alternative explanation. But it was actually a guy called Beauchamp who had the alternative. Well, it was the alternative in this discussion or argument about germ theory. How Robert Koch and Pasteur were obviously fraudsters, creating these. I mean, the video actually goes into a bit of discussion about how the fraud was actually committed, how it was actually perpetrated. It's quite interesting, actually. The guy that's doing it is Stefan Lanka. I don't know if you remember, a while back I gave you a small snippet of him mentioning that how he was able to argue his case in German courts because the German courts are the only ones that allow scientific evidence. You remember that little bit of video?
I do. Yep.
And he, if you do a search on it, it keeps coming up with Stefan Lanka, pseudo scientist, ordered by German court to pay Dr. Bernard because he'd made this, not a bet, but he'd offered 100,000 euros for anybody who could provide any evidence of isolation of any virus whatsoever.
Yep.
And nobody's been able to do it. But the lower court in Germany had actually found for the plaintiff, being this Dr. Bernard. But then when I was looking, I saw, I don't know, 50 or 60 links to stories about how this Stefan Lanka had lost the court case, but then you find out that he actually won it. He lost that one, but the higher court actually reversed the decision and found that the lower court had erred.
That's so typical, isn't it, for them to whatever, take one piece of news and highlight it whilst, not or making sure that the other piece of news, with the real results, let's say, of whatever a court case, get hidden in it, because they know the attention span of the people's short, and that most won't research any deeper. Yeah. But just to go back to the Louis Pasteur thing, because just to summarize what was said there, Louis Pasteur was the guy who postulated the idea of a pathogen too small to be detected by an optical microscope, right, by any means. And it was only when the electron microscope apparently came in the 30s, I think 1930s, that they could, get their first image, their first cartoon of a virus, right? And I just again want to point out electron microscopy and X-ray microscopy is all to do with how things diffract against crystalline structures. So at the end of the day, they're measuring the angles of which, right? They're measuring angles, right? Visible angles, or in this case, X-ray electromagnetic wave angles, bouncing off crystalline structures in different directions, and depending on the angle you measurement, you're making, assumptions. Well, not assumptions. You're stating as fact that is that structure or that element or that constitution or substance based on the way these things deflect, right? So, I just want to make people clear that that's the underlying scientific measurement behind saying a virus exists and we can see it, which is pretty shaky at best, right? If we're talking again about the visible world or the electromagnetic world in this case, slightly expanded, right? And talking about angular measurements of stuff, right? Because that's all we're getting with the big balls in the sky too, you know. So
yeah, it's microscopes and telescopes.
yeah.
Looking at or similar issues with at both ends of the scale.
And you know, I've said this to you many a time, and well, we've discussed this many a time, that this underlying idea of how do you measure things is at the root of this, or it goes into so many sciences, whether it's biology, chemistry, or physics. This underlying, you know, ability to define mathematics as a quantity of ratio and measure will depend very much on any of the assumptions that you're making, right? So, you know, if you're trying to measure something, then that's the layer where you define the mathematical concepts and axioms with which you will then further go. So if you're saying that I can do stuff using visible geometry, right, to measure and quantify things, right, say that because it's blue and deflected at 26 degrees, it's potassium, right, or it's CVD19, then that's also the thing, that's also the layer, if you like, of mathematical physics or theoretical physics, which makes people believe that it's all true. You know, so I mean, I'm just wanting to point out that I still feel that that's the place where it needs to be exposed or looked at in more detail to have a common understanding of what that measurement is. What the fuck are we saying we are testing repeatably? Because, you know, that's where all the scientists are, you know, every doctor's going to say, oh yeah, the guys in the lab, they'll know, they'll tell me what the test results are. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they won't question that layer. You know, that's all deemed to be correct. And we know how much it hangs in so many theoretical postulations, you know, whether light is wave particle duality, you know, how visible geometry is not discerned from physical geometry. So we know that there's a lot of assumptions in there that nobody else is really looking for. And I think, again, that's the reason most scientists are not out to harm us in any way, like the doctors, the biologists, and the chemists. They really do believe in this, you know, scientific,
Yeah.
pseudo-scientific layer, as far as I'm concerned, and they just build on that, thinking, oh, great, yeah, I'm doing good for the human race by doing this, that, and the next thing, right? Whether it's moving to the stars or trying to solve pandemics, not realizing that that's where they really should be questioning their assumptions. Sorry, I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring that in because I think it's the root cause of the, or not the root cause, but the root reason why they can perpetuate the deception. You know?
Yeah. I sort of need that further explained to me. I understand what you're saying, that there is that, how the layer, how that layer, that mathematical physics or theoretical physics layer is able to perpetuate the myth, or all the myths that we're faced with. But I don't. It's like I was watching a video earlier about. It was actually people that were anti or against the idea that coronavirus is real, but
Right.
I remembered something that you'd said yesterday, and I was looking at what they were doing, and their mathematical argument was all statistics. It wasn't
That's the
physics.
other one they use, probability and statistics, you know, like
Yeah.
again, but that's the quantification of how many and how much, right? Again,
Yeah.
that's a same mathematical layer we're talking about. If you're, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
like
well, that's what I was
probability
thinking
and
while I was watching it. I'm thinking to myself, at first I'm thinking, oh, great, some people that are putting out some information about why or how the coronavirus can be proved to be, you know, a joke. But when you look at it, it's not really. It's just them using a lot of numbers to try and argue against a lot of other numbers.
Yep. Well, that's what they do with their models and their projections, right? Where they try to get the data to fit the theory that they have, and the closer it fits the curve, you know, wow, the more certain they are that the theory is correct. But you know, they always tend to miss out all the other possible reasons that could, you know, contribute to the data coming the way it is. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
the idea of, you know, how are you feeling today, Glenn? You know, are you feeling better than me today? You know, who's going to answer that fucking
Yeah,
question?
well,
You
I
know,
know.
did you choke out more mucus today than me, Glenn? You know, are you iller than me? You know, so I mean, these things are so subjectively difficult to quantify but that's what they'll try anyway with their statistics and their models.
No,
right?
no, it's not that difficult. My temperature's higher than yours. I spat up 2 litres of mucus today. You only did 1.
Yeah. I just said a
So
wee dram.
I'm obviously sicker than you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, we discussed this yesterday, didn't we? That the deaths of or coronavirus, as far as I can see, are all natural symptoms happening in older people with underlying illnesses.
Yeah.
Or the odd freak, or what it is. Maybe somebody healthy. I'm not entirely sure, but again, the question would come up, well, are these people catching something? You know what I mean? Because at the moment, I'm of the opinion that it's a mind virus that's spreading. It's just a mental object that's out
Oh,
there.
definitely.
Because if you
It
look at the
is.
science behind it, it's shaky, right, or questionable at best, and needs to be inquired into much more deeper before we can really get to the root of it. And at the same time, people are running about with this mental object that there's infectious agents jumping from people, one to each other, and we're all going to die. So it's
got even worse in Australia. They've come up with another term, and I can't, because I only saw it once, and I can't remember what it was, but it's a new term that means that these people got coronavirus without ever being in contact with anybody that had it.
Yeah, I mean, they're still looking for patient zero, aren't they? Or what they term patient zero. That sounds like a science fiction novel.
Yeah, but if they in all their literature and all their media hype so far, it's all about infection control. But then they're telling you that there's people that are getting it that aren't being infected. They're getting it somehow or another, some other way. Yep. I mean, I think the biggest lesson that we should take from this whole episode is just how mentally retarded the general population is. And actually, I include myself in amongst that. I mean, I've sort of I've struggled with my own responses to some of the stuff that's going on at the moment. Well, it's been going on for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Dale was asking the same question last time. I was unfortunately working, so I couldn't really get on. But are the people buying toilet paper out of the nutritional value? I mean, are we expected to eat it? And it's just amazing how easily duped the people are into doing stuff, right, or getting frightened. I mean, there's people I met last week walking about with gloves in their hands so that they didn't touch their own face. I mean, that was the kind of reason that was given, where I'm saying to myself, Jesus Christ, people bumping elbows and all this kind of stuff, where you can just see how easily it was to how should I say, get them all scared. It's that is a sad part about it, that nobody really, or that the people, the general populace, are not applying their own thinking and just taking everything in from the TV once again, right, or the media.
Yeah, and you can see how these memes are perpetuated by the media. I don't know whether I described it to you recently, but I saw a video recently where it showed a newsreader reading a particular news story.
Yeah.
And then it divided the screen into two, and it had two different newsreaders saying exactly the same thing, word for word. Then it divided into 4, and there was 4 people saying identical. In the end, the screen was covered with little tiny images, probably about 150 or I don't know how many images, with everybody saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't actually, the noise was just white noise, basically. You existed, but you could see that these people were all reading from exactly the same script.
I've seen a video like that too. I think it had 24 screens on it with 24 different news broadcasts, all reading out from the same script. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way media works nowadays, right? I mean, I don't think there's any real investigative journalism, or seldom, and they're all just reading from some, how should I say, shared pipeline of information. So
yeah.
Well,
I'm of the opinion that there's never been an honest journalist live on this planet. Well, there have been a couple that have become honest towards the end of their lives. I remember there's a recording or no, it may not be a recording, maybe just some text about somebody who was being lauded at the end of his career for being, you know, such a great journalist. And he gets up and his speech is basically about how, you know, we all in this room know that if we ever dared to write what we really believe, we'd be out on the street without a job within seconds. And his whole speech was about just how corrupt he was and how corrupt he'd been throughout his career.
I think it was a German journalist, actually. Was it not a German journalist who kind of packed out?
I'm really not sure.
I might be wrong. I just remember the video with some guy with an accent, and I'm pretty sure he was German talking about it. But yeah, I think a whistleblower from the journalist industry. Yeah, or the.
Well, I thought it was. When I was just mentioning it, then I was thinking it was a guy called Josiah Stamp. But
okay.
Josiah Stamp. It wasn't Josiah Stamp. Josiah Stamp was one of the bankers who came out and said that. He basically made a speech towards the end of his life where he said that all the great fortunes like his should be destroyed. He sort of went into a great speech about just how evil the banking system was, and you know, how the world would be a much better place if that thing didn't exist, even though it had been the means by which he'd become so wealthy.
Yep. Yep. I mean, that's again a couple of questions I still have. What's the measure of a virus, right? And certainly this whole topic, you know, I should say, for me, it just shows again how that mathematical layer is used to manipulate, and how scientists and, you know, all the people can fall into the same trap of belief, but still well-meaning, you know, most of them, right?
Okay, so how do you explain what the measure of a virus is? What do you mean by that term, the measure of a virus?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. What are we measuring? If this thing really is some kind of very small, substantial piece of whatever material, right? Natural thing, or, you know, whatever they say. I've heard various things. It's just a protein code. It has an ability to duplicate, you know, the DNA and copy itself. But other people saying it's not really alive. You know, I've heard so many or read so many conflicting things where there doesn't appear to be an absolute science, right, or absolute even consensus into what a virus actually is. But, you know, for me, the question just becomes, okay, what is it I'm measuring? Am I measuring the length of something, the surface area of something, you know, the volume of something? What exactly is it that I'm, you know, if I were to swap you now and you know, put it into a little test tube and shake it, you know, I'm assuming that, you know, something will go a different color. You know, Glenn's got this virus, you know, but exactly what are they doing when they're doing that, you know, shaking it, putting it in some soluble solution, or when they're taking a measurement and they're looking through, you know, some electron microscope and measuring angles of crystalline structures. What is it they're actually measuring? It's never really said, right? It's never really defined as to what they're actually measuring and how they're measuring it. And as you say, it just ends up in statistics or, you know, visible data, let's say, which is then interpreted in some way to fit some theory. So, you know, that's what I mean by it. You know, how do you actually quantify and measure it? Yeah. And I don't see any real literature that explains it properly. There's
the stuff that I've been looking at it from the point of view of dissidents. There's an organisation called the Perth Group, and I remember the beginnings of the Perth Group because it was when Andrew, my brother, was ill, and I started looking into this whole concept of viruses and stuff like that. And the Perth Group was one of the first groups.
Sorry, you lost your brother to a virus, right? Didn't you?
Yeah. Well, to
what they say, to the symptoms, to the effects of their claim.
Yeah, he died from pneumonia. He died from pneumonia and Kaposi sarcoma. But one of the things that the measure that they're looking for, and the same thing that this Stefan Lanka is looking for, is the isolation of whatever is being claimed is a virus.
The unit substance, right, from which we would measure all other virus populations, right? That you know,
or by which you would claim that it is a virus.
that it's
they
even
have
there to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah. They go into what they call Koch's postulates. There's and actually,
when you hear the word postulates, off you go. Yeah.
Well, it might be worth looking into because that might be how they're getting into that mathematical layer you're talking about. Because by the use of these postulates that Koch, and it's funny because I think it's Robert Koch that did the I think it's Koch, it's Koch, it could be Koch.
It's Koch. Koch.
Right.
Yeah.
Robert Koch. He there's actually in Germany the Robert Koch Institute, the RKI. But he developed these postulates. They were actually, I think, previously postulated by a guy called Henle, Henle, and I think they're sometimes called the Henle-Koch, Henle-Koch postulates, and that's about how you can claim that something is a virus only by being able to isolate it. I haven't actually read it deeply enough to actually explain here.
I'll have a look at that because that's certainly what I'm looking a little bit closer at, just to fully understand it.
Yeah, well, I think that would be a way of their idea of the measure of a virus is to be able to isolate it. At the moment, and one of the ways that Stefan Lanka has looked at debunking it is by going through all the so-called photographs of viruses. Yep. And he shows that every single photograph that's claimed to be of a virus cannot be. Some of them are actually photographs of cells. Some of them are actually just photographs of detritus within cells, and they're not uniform. Like if it was a virus, they'd be uniform. They'd have their own internal structure. All these other things that would be claimed that these so-called viruses have, and none of those things exist in those photographs.
Yeah.
And actually, he mentions Goethe. He actually mentions Goethe writing in Faust about this whole concept. How Faust is actually a reworking of Paracelsus,
right,
from the Greek times, coming up with a germ theory.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it says it in that theory, right? Again, as soon as you see the word theory, then you know that it's not a physical, natural fact, right? It's somebody's postulation in his head of what a possible explanation could be. And whilst that might be laudable, right, that people make those thoughts and have those ideas, and I'm not saying it doesn't take us further. We need to be very careful when one or single select individuals can propagate their theories and their ideas, and then they're accepted as fact without any question. I mean, which is the reason we are where we are, because people don't do that enough anymore, right? So I definitely need to look into that, though. I haven't, I'm only scratching the surface.
Lanka actually mentions that the original basis of this whole theory that Western medicine is now based upon started with a belief that disease was actually a contamination of the fluids of the body.
Contagium fluidum, right? The living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The body contains over 270 different fluids. The fluids in your eyes, the fluids in your ears, all these different fluids that do different jobs throughout the body. They came up with this theory that disease was actually something that was getting in and corrupting those fluids, contaminating those fluids. And that's what all modern medicine is based on. If you actually go back, when you watch that video, you'll see his explanation of it anyway. Not to say that he's correct, but I found it quite interesting. And he sort of he points out that whole concept of pandemics has been going on since, you know, the beginnings of the Vatican,
right?
Where the priests and the city elders would deal with starvation conditions by getting rid of a certain amount of the population by creating a pandemic.
Yep. But I mean, again, we're back to. Sorry, on you
go. They were creating the pandemic without any real disease. They would just go in and say, we're saying that anybody who puts their right hand up and then puts their left hand behind their back has got a certain disease. Well, no, that's probably a bit silly, but anybody who's got a relatively normal behaviour, but that is a bit different to other people's behaviour, they'd go and find some people in a certain part of town that had that, were doing that thing or had that condition, and then they'd lock down that whole section of town and starve them to death, or somehow or another get rid of them. They were already dealing with lockdowns. They were already doing it way back when.
No, I don't deny. Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's a bit like the witch, you know. I mean, if she sinks, then she was innocent. Yeah. If she floats, then she was a witch. We'll kill her. You know. I mean, it's.
We found a witch. We found a witch. May we burn her? May we burn her?
Yeah. It's a bit like.
Are you sure she's a witch? Are you sure she's a witch? Well, she looks like one. And then he says, but there are ways of telling whether she's a witch. Are there? How? What do you do with witches? You burn them. What also do you burn? Wood? Yes. So, if she's a witch, she's made of wood.
So she'll float, yeah, or she'll burn, yeah.
So how do we tell whether she's made of wood? Put her in water. If she floats, she's a witch.
Yeah, it just shows you the how should I say, the contortions of logic or thought that people will go through, or not even. I mean, for me, again, you know, when we start talking about conspiracy, you know, who did it, when, where, you know, the evil people in their lair, you know, trying to kill the human race with vaccines. I'm always skeptical of that stuff because, you know, for me, it does seem as if, you know, that's again there just to divide and make people argue about who's responsible, right? So looking at the motives of the crime again, and rather, or the intent behind it, rather than focusing on, wait a minute, can we just analyze this with facts first and, you know, check what's actually going on before we jump into that train of thought? You know, and that's where everybody seems, as far as I'm concerned, to skip that layer that we should be looking at and start arguing about, you know, conspiracy theories or different models, you know, instead of saying, well, wait a minute, can we just go back to the start and look at, you know, what is actually being said here? What were the theories, you know? Yeah. That's and we're at fault ourselves. I mean, because all this talk about conspiracy is all very well and good, but if you're buying into this mental idea, if you're buying into this mental object or this mind virus, I'll say it openly, then it's your own fucking fault, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it is, whatever excuse we have underneath it, we haven't been taught, or knowledge has been held from us, or we've all been indoctrinated. It's still our own choice to buy into it, you know. So.
Oh yeah.
We shouldn't be too.
Yes, I agree with
that. Again, that's where people like to rest on their laurels and say, "I could never have known. How could I possibly have helped?" You know. Well, you could by just fucking waking up and starting to think for yourself. That would be a start, right?
Well, they even admit it themselves. I don't want to think about it. Don't want to talk about it. Too hard for me. The experts know. You know. Logical fallacy upon logical fallacy.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on. But it's really sad, and I know people will probably not like the term mentally retarded, but I believe that's exactly what's going on. I believe the human race, or the general populace at least, has been mentally retarded.
And as much as held back, you know, I would agree with you. You know, I mean, if you
yeah.
they've been
Well,
held
I'm
back
talking
to,
about your layer of mentals, the mathematical, the
yeah,
layer of mathematical theories, or that layer that nobody's looking into. They won't look into it because they're mentally retarded. They're retarded to the point that they won't look at that. They won't even use their own common sense.
yeah, to rip it
I
to
mean,
pieces. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Well, even common sense has been usurped. The
Yep.
term common sense.
Yep.
You know, common sense means different things to different people, when in actual fact there is only one real common sense.
Yep. I'm completely in agreement with you. We've been saying that for years too. I mean, people
Yeah,
people are getting that. Yeah, I think you know that they've every right to trust their own constitution and what their own common sense knowledge tells them, rather than believe somebody in a white coat. You know, I think this whole flat Earth stuff, and especially that topic, has helped people definitely wake up, or think at least for themselves about that part. But and as you
yeah,
say, it's so easy for them to just say, "Oh no, that's too difficult for me." And mathematics is couched in that, you know, difficult, you know, language. First of all, the definitions that you have to make, right, and then
yeah,
understanding all the symbols and the way it hangs. But it's not that difficult, as we, you know, hopefully showed the last time. You know, talking about a wee dram, or you know, you do need some substantial objective body, right, with which you can base your measurements. And if you don't have that to begin with, then you really need to be asking, what the fuck are you measuring, right? You know, I mean, it's as simple that. I can't get it any simpler than that. You know, you need a unit of measurement, and then you need to go and quantify it. And you know, as we talked earlier, you know, how are you feeling, Glenn? You know, where is that objective unit of measurement when we both say I'm worse than you, or I'm 3 times more ill than you? 3 watts, you know,
yeah.
you know. And if you don't have that, then we're in Gaga land to make up all kinds of stories, right?
I think this is the coronavirus episode is probably might end up being a good way of explaining it, getting into exactly how reality is transformed into mentality.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes back to our, you know, you've got physicals, you've got sensibles, and you've got mentals. You know, so if you were to look at the virus, you know, there's the postulation that there's this physical thing, right, that nobody
Yep.
can see and nobody can really, you know, quantify or measure properly. You know, there's still the whole field of virology is, you know, for me a kind of, I don't know. I hate to use the term. Well, no, it's pseudoscience at best. You know, we're
It is
relying
pseudoscience.
on too many theories. And then you've got the sensibles where, you know, we'll sneeze and cough, and you know, we'll have, you know, symptoms that are natural part of everyday life, right, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, and natural cause of old people with illnesses dying and young people being, you know, virulent, and they haven't really got a problem. And then all the way into this, you know, mental world where now everybody's got a virulent strain of fucking mentalitis. You know, I mean, I'm looking for the right word, but this, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The madness, you know, everybody's got
It is.
or
It has
mental
it.
retardation, as you say, you know. So
It is a form of madness too.
yeah,
It's the I forget what I was going to say now.
yeah, me too. Sorry. I thought
the
we keep
the
this one fairly short anyway, just
yeah,
so that it's not too long, and I need to dive in a minute. But I
yeah,
don't know if
no
you want to
worries.
say any final words on the topic, and we can.
Wake up, people. Please,
Please.
please have a look at what's really going on. One of the things I was just thinking was about the reality is that they even claim, the claim is made by all these authorities that are doing the scaremongering, that it's not really that harmful.
Hmm.
It's only the elderly that are dying, and they say possibly the very, very young, but that in most cases, people are over it in a few hours or a couple of days or something.
Yep.
Now, why would people, what is the connection? How does that connect to having such a system of lockdowns, of horrific control measures, of maybe mandatory or forced vaccination. How can people start even thinking about and looking at those things happening when they're being told, oh, it's not that serious anyway?
Yep, there's so many contradictions in the information that they're giving out. Yeah,
totally contradictory. Here it is, it's this weird, vicious, horrible pandemic that's going to destroy the world, but it ain't that bad.
Yep. And we've solved it with the measures that we took. Aren't we all clever? They'll be clapping themselves in the backs in a couple of months, you know. I just find it sad that they're giving out stories like, you know, young children shouldn't be going visiting their grandparents anymore for fear of endangering them. And I mean, because we're all aware of that anyway, right? That the very young and the very old are the high risk groups, you know, for anything, for walking across the fucking road, Glenn, right? Never mind anything, you know, a natural disaster or environmental change, you know. And this whole idea of, you know, social distancing, which they're pushing, right? You know, stay away from people and put masks on and don't gather in groups. You know, I think that's also part of this, you know, to stifle grassroots movements and the ability for people to talk amongst themselves openly and freely. So
it's a furthering of the divide and rule syndrome.
Yep. Same old, right?
I don't know whether you call it a syndrome, but you know, that whole idea of divide and rule, it just seems to be a perpetuation of that system.
Absolutely. And on that note, I will stop the recording, I think.
Okay, mate.